This podcast is all about the joy of missing out. It's so important. Doing less, saying no, disconnecting and watching Dancing on Ice, or whatever floats your boat. The joy of missing out, JOMO. I'm Tony Rice and this is Zestology Podcast. It's all about energy and vitality and motivation. And I started the podcast because a few years ago, I didn't have any. I got really ill on a visit to the jungle. I spent 3 months in bed, didn't go into work, didn't really ever know if I'd recover. And that's what inspired me to start Zestology. And now I look into various different ways of living with energy, vitality and motivation. And one of those is the joy of missing out, without a doubt. Fear of missing out, or FOMO, really is wrecking our lives, I think, and possibly more now than ever. So this podcast is a compilation of some of my favourite podcast guests, past and future, who live a JOMO life, and my thoughts on JOMO as well. It's a pretty dark, dank, unpleasant winter's day as I stroll around West London in the streets near where I live. And my thoughts on JOMO are, I've been switching off for a while now. I mean, a couple of hours a day, I try to switch everything off in terms of connectivity, email, WhatsApp, text, playing chess online, whatever it might be. And I noticed that more than ever, those 2 hours are the best 2 hours of my day. Recently, I've got out of the habit of it a little bit. And yesterday I had a really good reminder. I was just in a real funk and my head was kind of really buzzing with all the things I needed to do. And I just switched off for a couple of hours. And I put the radio on in the kitchen. That might sound a bit counterintuitive in terms of switching off, but for me, when you're connected on the internet, when you're kind of speaking to people and you're able to kind of actively search for things and do things on the internet, that's when your head starts buzzing. When you relax with the radio on and a book in your hand, which is exactly what I did yesterday for 2 hours, I just felt myself so start to unwind and let go. After about half an hour, I put the book down. I was just kind of fizzing with ideas and inspiration and creativity, and it wasn't just relating to work, it was relating to, I don't know, some holiday we could take and all sorts of things. So that's my thoughts on JOMO. And the first person I wanted to speak about JOMO was a former guest, the absolute runaway best-selling author of The Life-Changing Magic of Not Giving a Fuck. Sarah Knight is the ultimate JOMOer. She's the author of sweary self-help titles. That's the only way to describe her. And The Life-Changing Magic of Not Giving a Fuck has sold so many copies. She's now given it all up to go and live in the Dominican Republic and write books and drink Prosecco by the beach, and has a great life as well as being a best-selling author. And she's coming up soon on Zestology. So here's a sneak preview of the interview we've recorded for March. After that, you'll hear Katie Brindle, very much a friend of the show and someone who's very much into being aware of the perils of oversharing. That was from podcast 235. But first, on this JOMO episode, I've told you why I think it's important, and here is someone who is passionate about simply saying no, Sarah Knight.
I love it. I love the joy of missing out. In fact, I wanted to call this book The Joy of No, but we needed to put a swear word in the title. So there is a little chapter called The Joy of No. But I personally don't experience FOMO too much, at least not in social settings. I'm very fond of my couch. I don't usually feel like I'm missing out on parties and fun stuff, although I do experience it in a work professional setting, which ties into my overachieverness. So I kind of separate out the concept of FOMO for different readers in a social and work setting. But for me, it's like, if you don't want to do something, like you don't want to go to a party, but you're afraid that you're going to miss out on something fun at the party, well, which feeling is stronger? And if the feeling of not wanting to go is stronger, then listen to it and don't go. And if you regret it later, then you can change your mind the next time. But I don't see any point in torturing yourself with this fear of missing out and preventing yourself from enjoying the nice quiet night in that you theoretically preferred.
I've got this theory that JOMO is more important than ever before because there's just so many demands on our time, and we're all so time strapped. It must be worse than ever because of the way that our work intrudes into our lives, and we're so busy and we've got so many social options. It really is important to switch off, do nothing, do less, and let the world plow on regardless.
Because it will. I mean, it's going to go on regardless of whether you're tuned into it or not. And, one of the biggest, central concepts behind all of my books is the idea of your fuck budget, which is your time, energy, and money. And you spend those things, according to what happiness you reap from them. And so I think that if people started thinking about their time and energy as thoughtfully as they often have regarded their actual money and their actual budget, then you would start to see exactly what you're talking about, how valuable that time is, and how, it makes more sense to reserve some of it just for us, whether it's for enjoyment, for doing something fun, or for not doing anything at all and just recharging.
Let's start with overscheduling, because I think that's quite a constant theme for me. I have conversations so often about how I just need to plan less.
Yeah.
Is that something that you think about as
Honestly,
well?
I think it's a modern day sort of epidemic. It's certainly something that I am so guilty of. And actually, it reached a sort of point about a month ago where I thought, you know what, this is just ridiculous, because I'm so overscheduled that there's zero enjoyment of anything, because you just can't savour anything any longer. And it's also something I noticed in clinic, because whenever I see a patient, they're just always stressed. And when they start talking about their lives, they start effectively giving you a commentary on where we are as a society, which is family life, a very extended work life, a very high expectation of all the possibilities that we can actually have available to us, which in the old days simply weren't even there. And the net result is we're all flying around trying to cover all our bases and not necessarily actually having a good time in the process.
And everyone's saying the same thing, aren't they?
Yeah.
Everyone is overstressed, overbusy, got too many plans in, pushed at work, and then checking their email when they're not at work, and then not enough time for the family and everyone else and social life at weekends.
Right. And I think, the concept of kind of, less is more, but, savouring what you have. I mean, if I think back to like my nan, she's a good example, if she was doing something nice, you'd have the opportunity to actually, A, look forward to it, and then B, relish it at the moment in time of whatever it was. Whereas I found in contrast in my life, it's just, I sometimes look at my diary and actually feel slightly sick, because I just think, oh God, if I actually look at the week I've got to get through, I can't actually cope. So I'm just going to focus on and get through today.
I feel stressed thinking about it.
Yeah. And
your diary makes me feel stressed.
I'm not surprised. I mean, it's just a bit insane. But I then decided to basically apply the concept of JOMO, joy of missing out, which annoyingly then became a thing after I thought of it. I was really annoyed because I thought, hang on, I thought that ages ago. But JOMO, I think, is such a great concept where you just basically become super discerning and you think, right, okay, I need to have bandwidth in my day for nothing, which in Chinese medicine is what we would call the yin, the rest. And the concept of just, I live in the country, so just sitting by the fire and just relaxing and just absorbing, everything that's been going on, rather than to feel the need to kind of, put my kids to bed and then rush out down to the local pub to meet X, Y, and Z and do whatever it was. I've tried where possible to be really discerning about my diary and allocate in my day time where there's nothing to do. And that's actually golden time.
So that was Katie Brindle, and before that Sarah Knight, and this is the JOMO episode. And I'm just strolling along the River Thames in London. And it's not a particularly pleasant February day, but living by the river I feel very lucky, because it is a chance to every once in a while switch off and get a bit of JOMO on. Next time I come down here, I'll not bring my recording gear, and then I really will be enjoying the missing out. But at the moment, I am recording this podcast while I'm strolling along here. And the next two guests on this Joy of Missing Out podcast, and I hope it's providing a little bit of inspiration, are two people who I really look up to in terms of the way that they unplug and they do less with their lives. Chris Ryan, who's one of my favourite authors, was a podcast guest a couple of months ago, and he says that he very much lives a hunter-gatherer lifestyle, which is a lot of lazing around and every once in a while doing a tiny bit of work. And what great work he does. He's got a brilliant podcast called Tangentially Speaking. and he's also written 2 excellent books, one on sex and one on civilization, which I highly recommend. You can search them out. After that, you'll hear from Brett Moran, who, he gave it all up. I probably should say that the 4 podcast guests I've got on this particular Joy of Missing Out podcast live on 4 separate continents. And Brett lives in Thailand. He's English, but he went to live in Thailand. And I think he pays £10 a day rent. And he doesn't have any bills at all. And I've hung out with him in Thailand quite a bit. Let me tell you, he's got a pretty good life. So Brett Moran's coming up. Before that, Chris Ryan. Now, I know Civilised to Death has been quite a long time in the making since your last book came out. And I think you said it kind of start to finish, about 5 years, wasn't it, this book?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's so hard to measure these things. I can tell you that I signed the contract to write the book probably 8 years ago. And so the first deadline I blew through was probably 7 years ago. I walk the talk in the sense that I have the work ethic of a hunter-gatherer, which is not very disciplined. People think hunter-gatherers were living on the verge of starvation and just a constant struggle to survive, and that whole, what I call the neo-Hobbesian narrative. In fact, hunter-gatherers rarely work more than 20 hours a week. And the things that they're doing that we're referring to as work are things that we tend to refer to as vacation time. They're hunting, they're fishing, they're walking around in the woods gathering berries. They're basically picnicking. If I say I have the work ethic of a hunter-gatherer, that means it takes me a long time to get anything done.
Yeah. If I lived a little bit more within my means and I didn't buy that new car, I would only have to work half as hard.
Yeah, and you can enjoy your life a bit more. But you're right. I think society or the system, it gets us to spend our future. So you get a credit card, or you can get like a car on finance, but you've really technically you spent 5 years of your life to pay it back. If you get a 5-year loan to get a car, it's like that's 5 years of your life. And it just twigged in my head a few years ago. I'm always spending my future when I'm doing things like that. So I try not to have no credit, got no credit cards, I've got no debts whatsoever. It's literally, I pay my rent 6 months up in front, which obviously my rent here is about probably 1 month's rent in London, if I'm honest.
How much is it? How much? Because I've seen your place. It's a nice place.
It's right. It's literally on the beach. It's probably I think it was about, I just got a little bit of a discount because this is the second time I've paid her up front. It's I'd say about 1,200 quid for 6 months.
For 6 months? Hang on.
Yeah.
1,200 quid for 6 months. That's 200 quid a month. That's about 50 quid a week. 200. Okay, it's about, you're looking at probably tenner a day or a bit less.
Actually, it's quite expensive, isn't it?
that is amazing. There you go, Brett Moran on Zestology. That's pretty much it for my Joy of Missing Out episode. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you feel a little bit inspired to put the FOMO away, switch off, disconnect, and miss out on that party or that invite or what someone's saying about you on Facebook. Don't worry about it. It's all about relaxing and doing less, and I hope this podcast has inspired you to do that. It's one of my themes of 2020, so I thought it'd be fun to record a podcast on that particular topic. And if you enjoyed Sarah Knight talking about JOMO, she's been on Zestology 3 times. Her books are awesome, and she's coming up again in the next 3 or 4 weeks or so. So Sarah Knight, full podcast with her recorded live from the Dominican Republic, which is where she lives, on a slightly dodgy internet connection. But hey, that's, as she says, that's tropical living for you. So she's enjoying life over there, and I always enjoy speaking to her. There's a fun vibe to her books and her message, but it's a good message as well. So Sarah Knight's coming up in the future. The other podcasts with Katie Brindle, Chris Ryan and Brett Moran you can find in the Zestology archives on TonyWrighton.com. Thank you, as always, for listening to Zestology. Do check out Sunlight and Saunas. That's a nice way to kind of lock yourself away in a nice warm box with nothing to do or worry about. And if you mention Zestology, you'll get $200 or £200 off. I won't mention too much about sunlight and saunas now, because we're actually recording a podcast in the sauna in a couple of weeks' time, which could be interesting. A little bit worried that the equipment's going to melt, but we'll see how that goes. But for now, yeah, check out Sunlight and Saunas. Thank you to them for partnering up with Zestology. And thank you for listening. Have a great week full of JOMO, and I'll see you soon.